Hi guys, so today we're going to do some factoring. So factoring is basically just multiplication in reverse. So when you multiply two numbers together, you get a product. With factoring, you're given a product and you have to find all the ways that you can multiply different numbers together to get that product. So some numbers have more factors and some only have a few. So when we factor, there are some basic rules that we can use that'll help us to know if different numbers are going to be a factor of the number we're looking for. So 1 is a factor of all numbers. So you always know 1 will work because 1 times any number will give you the same number. 2 is a factor of all even numbers. So if the number ends in a 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8, you know that 2 will be a factor of that number. 3 is a factor if the sum of the digits can be divided by 3. So what that means is if you look at the individual digits of the number and you add them all up and you get something that can be divided by 3, you know that 3 will be a factor. So if we look at something like 114, well, I don't know if 3 times anything will give me 114, but I can check. The digits are 1, 1, and 4. So 1 plus 1 plus 4 is equal to 6. 6 can be divided by 3, so 3 will be a factor of 114. 5 is a factor if the last digit is a 0 or a 5. 6 is a factor if both 2 and 3 are factors. So if you already checked your number and you know that 2 is going to be a factor and 3 is a factor, then 6 will also be a factor. 9 is a factor if the sum of the digits can be divided by 9. So just like with 3, you have to look at your individual digits in your number, add them up, and see if you can divide that number by 9. And then finally, 10 is a factor if the last digit is a 0, only a 0 for 10. So now we're going to practice some factoring. So when you factor, you want to have your rules ready for you because those will help. And also you might want a multiplication grid to help you out as well if you need that. So we're going to factor 24. So when I factor, the first thing that I do is I'm going to list my numbers 1 through 12. And the reason that I'm doing this is that it's a visual reminder for me to check all of these numbers. And we should know most of our facts through the 12s table, so that's why I'm listing up to 12. So now we're going to start with 1. Well, we know that 1 is a factor of all numbers because 1 can be multiplied by our number to get the same number. So we're always going to have 1 listed. Now we're going to move on to 2. So 2 is a factor of all even numbers. 24 ends in a 4, so that means it's even. So we know that 2 times something will give us 24. And if you know your facts, then you know that 2 times 12 will give you 24. We'll move on to 3. So 3 is a factor if the digits add up to something that can be divided by 3. So if we look at the digits on 24, they are 2 and 4. 2 plus 4 is 6. 6 can be divided by 3, so we know that 3 will be a factor. And if you know your facts, you know that 3 times 8 will give you 24. Now we move on to 4. There isn't really a rule that we can use for 4 right now. It's complicated, so you just need to know your facts to know if 4 will work. So 4 times something will give us 24. And if you know your facts, you know that 4 times 6 will give you 24. Now we move to 5. So the rule for 5 is that if the number ends in a 0 or a 5, then 5 will be a factor. 24 doesn't end in a 0 or 5, so I'm going to cross that off because it's not going to be a factor of my number. Now we move to 6. Well, we already have 6 listed here in our factors list. So once you hit a number that you already have, you can stop because you know that anything past that number, you're going to have to multiply something from before. So once we hit something like that, we're done. And we can now list our factors. So right now what I have is called factor pairs, and those are the two numbers that you multiply together to get your given number. But when I list my factors, I want to list them in order from least to greatest. So I'm going to make a little arrow here, and that'll show me how I'm going to list them. So I'm going to start with 1, and then just go down my list, 2, 3, 4, and then back up and around, 6, 8, 12, and 24. So those are all of my factors of 24. Okay, now you guys give it a try.